Republican State Representative Matt Shaheen of Plano, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. As you know, Governor Abbott has until Sunday to issue a veto on a bill, including the budget. He has threatened to do so as far as the legislative portion of the budget. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I share the governor's frustrations when the Democrats abandoned their constituents and walked off the job with 2 days left in session. They essentially killed, election integrity, bail reform, key funding for education. So I share his frustration, and he said he was going to cut Article 10, which funds the legislature, and I expect him to do so.
And it seems like you support it.
I do. The Democrats literally walked off the job. They were elected to do a job. We were all elected to represent our constituents during this legislative session, and they literally walked off the job, left the Capitol when we had very important work to do around bail reform, election integrity. So that is a power that the Constitution gives the governor, and if he's going to use it to send a message and maybe bring the legislature back for a special session, then he should do it.
The Democrats say they didn't just walk off the job. They used a tool that is within their, authority as legislators.
Well, sure, there's lots of rules, right? But you don't want to abuse rules, and you end up killing very important legislation to the state of Texas. Again, there was key education funding there around funding virtual education, which is very important. Bail reform was a top priority. We could have had an opportunity to make the state of Texas safer, and they chose to walk off the job, and it hurt Texans.
And do you think that if the governor does follow through, you said you expect him to do so, that will keep the Democrats' feet to the fire, so to speak, and so that they will, pass bills without walking out and taking away a quorum as we saw before?
I think it'll be one of the mechanisms, but the reality at the end of the day, we all need to go back to our constituents. We need to go back to our districts and convince people why we should be reelected. We had a great session, and I've got a lot of exciting things to tell my constituents. I've already had several town halls and spoke to people, about the objectives that we met. But I was there during the entire session. I never walked off. I never left my job, and the Democrats can't say that. So if they want to expound upon that and put themselves at either greater risk, that's their decision. But at the end of the day, yes, it's one tool I think the governor has to make sure that they do come back and do their job.
And let me just ask you, as far as the special session, have you heard anything? Any more specifics on when this might be?
There are rumors all over the place. The best intelligence I have is we're still waiting from the federal government to get us the data we need for redistricting. That probably won't put us in a position to do a special session until probably September of October. If I were to guess, and if the governor chooses to do so, he can add whatever he wants. It's totally under his purview. He has said he's going to put election integrity on the special session, which I'm very pleased about.
But if he is going to carry through on the budget veto, I would imagine that has to be done before the new budget starts. So it would have to, because you would all have to come back before August 31st.
Yeah, the new budget comes into effect September 1st. So again, it's totally up to the purview of the governor. If he wants to do 2 special sessions, 3, 10, or 1, it's totally his call based on the Constitution.
Regarding this issue that was at the center of the Democrats' actions, elections integrity, where are you on that? As you know, that's made national headlines. The Texas Democrats went to Washington this week. They met with Speaker Pelosi, Senate Majority Leader Schumer, and then the Vice President. And so, do you get a sense that Republicans are being pressured, to pass legislation that Democrats, would like better than what was, considered before?
Quite frankly, I think the Democrats are misreading the tea leaves on this. People want safe and good election integrity with respect to when they go and vote. It's the basis of our democracy, and quite frankly, we do election bills every session. And so this one's a little bit unique in that we took a lot of the election violations that occurred down in Harris County and maybe some other parts of the state, and we actually added some penalties to it, right? And so, but election reform is vitally important. We need to make it easy to vote, but hard to cheat. And apparently the Democrats are against that. Quite frankly, I don't think it looks good.
Well, one of the things that they talk about was this souls to the polls and the requirement in the final bill in the conference report that would have limited the voting on Sundays so that the early voting couldn't start until 1 o'clock. A lot of criticism, pushback on that, and I thought Representative Clardy had said it was a mistake. The governor said he had heard it was a mistake, and Speaker Phelan said it was a mistake. Where are you on that?
Well, look, at the end of the day, my understanding was they wanted the election integrity bill had the polls starting, I think it was at 1 o'clock on Sunday, so the poll workers could go to church. And so that's what it was. So, look, I'm flexible on the hours that are in the statute. What was happening beforehand is you had voting at 3 a.m. in the morning, and that's not secure elections. And so all the statute said was during the week, elections were from at a minimum 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Collin County is actually 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So this actually gives an opportunity to expand it, but it just provides guidance with respect to statewide hours. And again, the thought process, my understanding was that 1 o'clock on Sunday was so poll watchers, election volunteers could go to church. So look, if people want to negotiate that, that's perfectly fine. I think the accusation of suppressing the vote were inaccurate. I was disappointed in that. Quite frankly, Republicans want minorities to vote. Historically, we're seeing a shift right now in the state of Texas where minorities are moving over to the Republican Party. So quite frankly, the Republican Party wants minorities to vote. If you look at the recent mayoral elections, you have 2 Republicans that won elections in cities that are majority minority. Look at McAllen, I believe is 80% Hispanic. So you actually have an acceleration of the minority community coming over to the Republican Party. And that's because of a lot of the positions of the Democratic Party. They've been opposing charter schools, which mostly serve our minority students. This defunding of the police, the border. Now you have the president of the United States killing their oil and gas companies. So look, the Republican Party is very focused on the minority community, and we want them to vote. So these accusations are just silly, and they're just not taken seriously.
And let me ask you about another story that has made headlines this week, and that is ERCOT's decision to request Texans to conserve energy. What did you make of that? How concerning was that?
Well, yeah, what happened is ERCOT always makes a forecast of the amount of electricity, amount of power that's available, and they had forecasted an amount, I think it was around 70,000, and there was some power plants that actually shut down. There was a fire at one of the plants. And so they were under the forecast by 11,000 megawatts. So of course, ERCOT sends out a notice to conserve power. So I think it's happened like 24 times in the last 5 or 6 years. And so because these power plants went down, again, one was because of a fire, it's prudent on ERCOT to send out those messages to ask people to conserve.
And have you turned up your thermostat in response to their request for people to conserve?
I have. I tend to keep my thermostat kind of high to begin with. My kids will tell you I'm cheap, but yeah, I think we all as Texans need to work together. And if we need to turn the thermostat up, especially at night, I think that's a good thing. I think ERCOT tends to target the huge industrial users as well. So I think they work a little bit closer with them. But all of us, all Texans should, work together to make sure we all have power and we don't have the issues like brownouts that they have in California and other states.
And my last question to you is, just as somebody who's observed from away from the Capitol, is it fair to describe this session as one of hardball politics between Democrats and Republicans?
Not really. Austin is very different from Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is broken, highly partisan. Uh, and Austin just doesn't work that way. We don't sit on one side or the other. There's not the left, it's the right. 99% of the legislation that we pass is bipartisan. Of course, the areas where we disagree on, those tend to get a little bit more of attention. Maybe it was a little bit more of a conservative session than we normally have. I think that's true. But you know what? At the end of the day, elections, there are responses to elections, and the Democrats poured, I think, $40–50 million into the state of Texas trying to flip the House of Representatives. They didn't. The state of Texas, our constituents overwhelmingly said they want Republican leadership. And so there is going to be a response to that. And there was this legislative session. So sure, it was probably more of a conservative session than in past. But look, what we've shown is conservative policies work. That's why our population is growing at 1,000 people a day. That's why there's so much opportunity and job growth. It's because of those conservative policies. And look, people were real specific. They were very clear. They wanted a Republican majority. So we have to give them Republican type legislation to respond to their votes.
Republican State Representative Matt Shaheen of Plano, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and your insight today.
Okay, good being with you. Thank you.